you don't envisage yourself as a 70-year-old, and still having the fingers to get your hands around a guitar. So, yes, it is a little bit odd. And of course, when I was 17, 18, and just really starting to make a name for myself, this is before I joined Sweet, I'm thinking to myself that somebody who's my father's age, who would have been at that time probably about 50, he's old.
It's got to be a strange feeling being the last man standing in a classic rock band that's been around for a heck of a lot of years. But that's the case for Andy Scott of Sweet. He talks about being the only survivor in a band that had a hell of a lot of hits on rock history music. What happens when a band starts out as a bubblegum pop project, but transforms into one of the loudest, flashiest glam rock forces of the 1970s? That's the story of Sweet. Formed in London in 1968, the classic lineup featured Brian Connolly on vocals, Steve Priest on bass, Andy Scott on guitar, and Mick Tucker behind the kit. At first, they were guided by hit-making producers Chin and Chapman, cranking out sugary singles like Funny Funny and Coco. But Sweet wanted to be more than bubblegum. Behind the glitter and costumes, they were a tight, hard-rocking band, itching to prove themselves. Their breakout came with glam anthems that defined the generation. Little Willie, Ballroom Blitz, and Fox on the Run. And that was followed by Action on albums like Desolation Boulevard and Give Us a Wink. They took control of their sound, fusing pop hooks and thunderous riffs, and yeah, those great harmonies. Suddenly, Sweet weren't just another glam rock band. They were influencing the future of hard rock, paving the way for bands like Def Leppard and Motley Crue. But fame took its price. Lead singer Brian Connolly was living the high life of a rock star. He had health struggles that led to his departure in 1979, just as the band's momentum began to fade. Though Andy Scott and Steve Priest kept different versions of Sweet alive, and there were reunions with Brian, the golden era of Sweet was behind them. Connolly passed away in 1997, Tucker in 2002, and Priest in 2020. Still, their music survived. From the arena-shaking power of Ballroom Blitz to the soaring drama of Love is Like Oxygen, Sweet's catalog remained a glittering time capsule of glam rock at its peak, when rock was heavy, fun, and impossible to ignore. None of my 20-year-old friends came up to me when we were all growing up, and I still know them all. None of us looked at each other when we were 20 and said, "Oh, I wonder which one of us will die first." That doesn't enter your brain. But here you were,
No,
the last man standing of that. I mean, you got to look back, and there's been so many twists and turns in your career, and you've survived it all. Are you surprised?
I never quite envisaged, well, you never do you, when you first start to perform? But you don't envisage yourself as a 70-year-old, and still having the fingers to get your hands around a guitar. So, yes, it is a little bit odd. And of course, when I was 17, 18, and just really starting to make a name for myself, this is before I joined Sweet, I'm thinking to myself that somebody who's my father's age, who would have been at that time probably about 50, he's old. He felt, or 40 odd, he felt really old. My grandfather, who was 60 odd, he felt old. I thought to myself, nobody in my age group thought about reaching 30, because my God, you're not cool, you're not hip or anything like that. But then it all kind of changed in the 60s, that late 60s, when the flower power and you'd see these guys in America who were in their 30s, hippies, and just basically, and of course Woodstock just blew it all apart. And after that, you're then seeing bands come through with some older guys in there like Canned Heat, and all of a sudden what used to be the domain of only jazz and blues and folk musicians, all of a sudden pop is able to be older, and rock is able to be a little bit more mature. And then the Rolling Stones just, well, I mean, now, who'd have thought the Sweet would be having hits? We're number one in a couple of charts with our latest single over here. It's just ridiculous, man.
But did you know at the time that everything around you when you were a teenager, for instance, did you know that, hey man, stuff's happening here?
Well, I got a vibe of that. I was in a northern soul band. I mean, over here, it meant that you were doing covers of Tamla Motown and Stax and the soul singers, intermingled with a little bit of people like Georgie Fame or Mose Allison. You know, you'd throw in some left field curveballs, you know, and we were very lucky. In 1967, 66, we'd won this talent competition on TV. We'd been 5 weeks, you know, we just kept winning. And then a comedian who became very, very famous after this show beat us just before Christmas in November. And then we're all on the Christmas show. And our first set of gigs in January were with Jimi Hendrix. He came over to England and he had Hey Joe, and I'd heard it. It was like Cream. I knew who Cream were because I knew all the players and where they'd come from, the Yardbirds and the Graham Bond organization and things like this. But when they released their first single, Wrapping Paper, it wasn't representative of what the band was. And there's still something inside me that tells me when Hendrix released Hey Joe, it wasn't quite representative of exactly where he was going to be. You know, to a lot of promoters, they obviously thought, oh, he's like a soul singer with his bluesy ballad, you know. And when he came and played this gig, he emptied the fall. We went down phenomenally because it was in Manchester, and Manchester was the hotbed and the center of the soul music back then in 1967. So we went on stage for our hour, and we've been on TV, we've won this talent show, everybody's into it. Hendrix comes on, and within 15 minutes, they're all starting to drag themselves away. But me and my singer are on the side of the stage, riveted, watching this guy. I was literally, you know, 2 or 3 meters from him, you know, and he's got the guitar on the floor and he's lying on top of it and all this stuff. And I just looked at this guy, and we're a 7-piece soul band. And I said, that's the future. You know, Cream had just started to make an appearance. Led Zeppelin hadn't quite got there yet. And, you know, all these 3-piece bands, I mean, Sweet, you know, guitar, bass, drums and a singer. And I thought to myself, that's the future. Now, I'd been playing bass, even though I could play guitar and keyboards. I had been playing bass in the soul band. But the first thing that we did, within 6 months, we changed into this crossover band, playing well, what you might consider to be fairly prog rock these days. A little bit of the singer could play flute and Hammond organ anyway, so we were immediately, you know, getting involved with all of that. And I'm thinking to myself, this is going to go somewhere. And of course, when it doesn't quite go where you want, you move to London, and you're thinking, I joined a band in London, which split up. And I always believe in a bit of karma, you know, the opportunity to go and I'd met the Sweet. They were a bit of a pop band at that time. And I thought, in for a penny. And I went along to the audition, got the gig. And within 6 months, we were charted everywhere in the bleeding world. So, you know, it was the right decision, the right sort of time. They do say that there's these sliding door moments when, you know, you walk into something, and if you're 5 minutes late, it all changes, you know.
Yeah. Being 61 in February, people go, oh, you planning your retirement? I'm going, are you kidding? I'm making more money on YouTube than I ever made in 37 years in broadcasting. And I like what I'm doing, but I'm hearing you. And of course, I've done a lot of research on you, and I knew who you were, of course, but you still got that hunger.
We don't do it unless we enjoy it, because if you do it for another reason, it's never going to work properly. Anybody who thinks, oh, I'll just pick a guitar up and I'll earn loads of money, you'll be lucky. Yeah. You know, you've got to get in there and really, really enjoy it, and watch your little special, you know, niche here, you know.
I ask, I mean, well, do you consider it? I have to preface the question by going, I'd rather Pete Agnew run Nazareth than not have Nazareth. But when people ask you, is it still Sweet? What would you say?
there is a kind of timeline, and it was Sony over in Germany who came to me about 10 years ago, maybe a little after that, maybe 8 years ago, and said, look, we've been following what's going on. You're the only band that, however many of, like when Brian came out and was singing again with backup bands that he just picked up wherever he went, and was trying to call it the Sweet. It was never going to be the Sweet. You know, he'd left the band in '79. He was, I think, manipulated a little bit by a few promoters and things like that. How could I ever turn around and say to somebody, you know, the reason you're not in the band anymore, mate, is that, you know, your voice is shot, you know? But that was the case. And so you've got Brian Connolly Suite and Andy Scott Suite going around at one point in time in the 90s. And I'm thinking, Mick and I, in '81, we stopped touring. Steve moved to America. Mick then had a terrible thing happen to him where his wife was found dead in the bath one Christmas time. And he was, well, out of the picture for a year or more. I used to go and see him, and I used to try and gee him up and say, come and do some sessions with me. And he just wasn't interested. And then a couple of years after that, I bumped into an agent that, you know, was our agent. And he said, it's all out there if you want to come back. So I went and stayed with Mick for a couple of days. And at the end of it, we said, right, let's get Steve on the blower and let's get the band back together. Steve initially was like, yeah, okay. But in my heart of hearts, I knew he would, because you get to know people, you know their traits. And I just knew he, and Mick said it as well. He said, he ain't coming to Australia with us. You know, and we were saying, come over to England, have a week with us. We'll do some, I've got another bass player who can sing well to do your bits until you're needed. Come over here. And then we'll fly to Australia and New Zealand, do the tours that we've been promising, maybe stop in Singapore on the way home. And, oh, yeah, that sounds great. By this time, he was still living in, I think he was still living in New York. And I thought, you know, this could really, really work. But in the end, he didn't come back. So Mick and I moved forward into the early 90s. Mick fell ill. I almost decided not to do it anymore because there's only me. I had so many people phone me, promoters, agents, record companies. What are you doing? You know, you only have to look at bands like Uriah Heep, or, you know, there are ways here. You know, the music is the main thing here. And your band has always sounded like Sweet. So I carried on. It got to the point where Sony came to me, I think it must have been 2012, 13, and said, could we try and tie some dots up here with albums that you've released after the original band? And I thought, not sure about this. But when they put the package together, it sounded right. It didn't sound too bad, and it kind of made sense.
Is this the action package? Is this the DVD action package? Yeah.
Action, the ultimate story, and we put 2 new tracks on there, of which one of them is now a revamped version. The song "Still Got the Rock," which is the song that's charting at the moment. So, however much I think it's the fans who designate whether this is possible or not, because you'll soon know if it's not right. You know, nobody will be coming to the gigs. Everybody will be now on the internet. Everybody's got opinion. You know, they'll be on the internet telling you, you know, what an arsehole you are. And of course, I don't get that. They appreciate that there is a band out there performing Sweet songs for them to come and, well, used to be able to come and jump up and down. In fact, one of the funniest things was we could never find the right venue. We've been doing some gigs in December in the UK, about 10 or 12 gigs every December. And we could never find the right venue in London. And we used to play a couple of clubs, 2 nights in one club that held about 400 or 500 people. It's like playing the Marquee in the old days. These were the kind of gigs that you would play. And for 2 nights running, It was like a smallish PA, reduced back line. We heard the audience louder than anything else. They're singing along to the songs, and the singer turned around to me and he said, "I don't need to sing these. We'll let the audience sing them." And that's what I missed at the moment. With nobody out there, and I've spoken to a lot of people, and realistically, I don't know when gigging like we knew. I haven't gigged since the beginning of March last year. And just before that, I was the master of ceremonies, the MC, the guy who introduces the bands and does interviews with Wishbone Ash, Nazareth, and Uriah Heep in Germany. We did 18 dates, in the halls there. And it went great. It was called Music and Stories. And of course, there was a little bit of video footage that we'd shot on a couple of the days before the tour started, in and out of a tour bus or in a dressing room. Or I remember Andy Powell from Wishbone Ash, he didn't arrive until the evening before the first gig. So at the sound check, he and I are on a couple of stools on the side of the stage, chattering away with people with cameras. And that was the thing that was shown on the as like a prelim video before I interviewed the bands. And it was fantastic. And I'm thinking to myself, it's almost like being in a dream now.
Very much.
I haven't lost the will to live, but I seem to have lost a little bit of. If you'd have asked me this, I had to have a little bit of radiotherapy to calm a cancer scare that had flared up again last end of March. Yeah. I had prostate cancer in 2009. And I think that my oncologist, he kind of thinks of me now as a little bit of a protege. Here I am 12 years later, still around. I'm coming out of that in June, around the time when Steve is, passed away. And I have to tell you, I was not the best person to be around in June. That early part of June. And I was just, thinking about, various things. And it wasn't until my birthday, which is at the end of June, where it all kind of came back, and we started to realize that we might come out of this lockdown. And that's when I started to talk to the band and say, right, we need to get your voice on. I've got a drummer whose wife has had lung cancer and it's transferred elsewhere, but she's still around and doing well. But as he says, during lockdown, the last thing he wanted to be doing was mixing with people, so we weren't going to get drum tracks out of him. So rather than find somebody else, I went through every digital recording that I've got and found outtakes and live recordings that I got my engineer to edit up. And so what you hear on Isolation Boulevard is kind of fresh drum tracks that have been and then we've built the tracks up from there. I've even grabbed the ARP synthesizers from the original Fox on the Run and put them in on this new track that we've found or re-recorded. So there was a lot of instant karma that went into this, and people have said, why did you go down the route of the almost like a greatest hits, a little bit like Desolation Boulevard? I said, well, it's in the title, Isolation Boulevard. You've got to give the people what they want, and it's got to be a bit rocky. So you leave the earlier recordings out, the Little Willies. It's not there, but you go for the meat, and Set Me Free's on there, and Love Is Like Oxygen. So we do have some new material, but I'm loath to try and do it the way some of these other bands have done it, by welding it all together, getting the drummer to do his tracks over here and then adding a guitar here and a bass here. You do your voice at home, send it. No, it's not good enough. Have another go. I want the band. We're used to recording in the same room. So that's what I've got to wait for, so that we get at least a green, because we were able to do a little bit of that in September, October this year. This is how, we managed to get some of the backing vocals and the bass. And, I got the singer and the bass player down for a day, because they couldn't stay over because, it's not part of the rules.
Yeah.
But I've got enough space, distancing. You stand over there, we'll plug you in, and all that kind of stuff. And we're all having lunch 2 meters apart. It's yeah.
If you want to make a donation to the channel, there's a PayPal link at the very top of the description. We could always use your help. Remember, subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification so you don't miss anything. Like our videos, comment on them, and share them on social media in the appropriate groups. We'd appreciate that. That helps a lot. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Music. Take good care of yourself. Till next time.